Hi, I'm Dr. JJ Levenstein, and I'm here today to talk to you about growing baby basics. We've already reviewed all the basics of what a newborn and a brand new little infant look like, but I'm here today with Luca and his lovely mom, Jennifer, to discuss what babies do as they grow up, including talk back to the camera. So we're going to review Luca's anatomy from head to toe, and I'm going to discuss all the changes that we'll see in the first couple of years. It may take a little bit of time, but it will give you as a parent a very good basis for what to expect so that you don't worry when some things change over this next wonderful time from infancy to toddlerhood. So we'll talk to you in a minute, and thank you, Luca, for being part of this. Yes! And we'll talk about you in just a minute. Alrighty, bye. Okay, so Mr. Luca, we're going to talk about you from the neck up because there's quite a bit of business going on there in the first 2 years. As we know, or you may not know, Luca's brain grows 180% by weight in the first year of life. And that certainly does a number of things. It drives his appetite into a total frenzy, so he's an eating machine. But also, this is a period of time when he develops so remarkably, and his brain grows commensurate with that. So whereas little babies kind of coo and make little chittering sounds, he's a very verbal guy and often will echo back some of the sounds we're even saying, even at the ripe old age of 5 months. But his brain has to have kind of a maternity stretch panel to work against. So these fontanelles or soft spots that we see very early on in the baby continue to stay open generally until about 15 to 18 months of age. And during this time, they become what's called sclerotic. They get thicker and thicker, so they may not be as easily, softly touched as they are early on. And as time moves on, this will be less and less an obvious divot in his head, but more and more sort of a bouncy, more enduring piece of tissue here. The posterior fontanelle, the one in the back of his head, closed very soon after birth, but this one has to stay open to adapt to this absolutely wonderful growing brain with the wonderful developing baby who goes along with it. Now, as far as his nose is concerned, we discussed early on that babies are what are called obligate nose breathers for the first 3 to 4 months of life, and that means that they can't really breathe through their mouths if they have a cold or they're stuffy, so keeping their little noses clear with suctioning devices or picking out their little boogers is something that parents just have to do. But by 4 or 5 months of age, neurologically now, he's going to be more capable of breathing through his mouth if he gets a cold. So if he has a runny nose and all of a sudden you see him doing this through his mouth, it means his brain has adapted like we have to finding an alternative way to get air in. That still means that we need to suck his nose out if he's got some big blocking boogers there, because it's going to be a little tough for him to nurse or to feed if he's stuffy. But he can now breathe through his mouth if need be. So my boy here is taking a snack break, and that's a good thing. So let's talk a little bit more about that skull. Now, when babies are young and their sutures or the seams of their skull are overlapping, we feel these little rivers of Mississippi down their head, and it kind of alarms parents because it feels so odd and weird. But as those plates move apart and those seams calcify, the contour of the skull actually becomes smoother and smoother over the first couple of years so that you're not going to feel all those wavy seams there, and so it's not as alarming. Now, we have a nice good look at his ears here, and one of the things we know when babies first come out is that the helix and the cartilage of the ear, this is the helix here, often looks like Spock. It's very soft, it's very malleable, and we wonder what our kids' ears are going to look like. But typically by the time babies are 4 to 5 months of age, the helix starts to take on its normal conformation or its normal appearance. And if parents actually lift up their hair and take a peek, generally his ears are probably going to look very much like one of yours. It's, much like talking about feet and legs and backsides. This is one of the characteristics that really sort of flows from parents to children. So it's wonderful. His look good. It's a good thing you don't have Spock as dad, right? Right. Okay. So he is looking very intently at his mom, and one of the things that I want to talk about now is eyes and eyesight. Kids this age, 4 to 5 months of age, can actually almost count their parents' eyelashes. They're near vision is very, very precise. And as they move towards toddlerhood and they're crawling and then ultimately walking, their distance vision becomes amazing to the point where they could pick out a shiny object across the room, much like little raccoons. So if you think of them as a little creature in the forest finding food, 100 yards away, that's a toddling baby. But for now, what's so essential for him is to be able to see mom and to know that she is there for him, and also dad as well. His gorgeous little lashes and brows are growing in, and not only are they there for protection of his eyes to keep dust and foreign bodies out, but they're also there to be a source of allure for all the people who care for him, because babies naturally just draw people into their world, and the more we want to touch them and love them, the better off they are emotionally and physically. So nature put into place this wonderful plumage on babies to attract us to them in a just wonderful sort of way. Now his cute little nose is all cartilage, and there's a big blood supply in the nose. So if he bonks his nose on anything, whether it's the side of his crib or whether it's a parental face or against an article of furniture, you might see quite a bit of swelling, and you may worry that there's a fracture or something terribly wrong because there is such a huge blood supply here. But when in fact fractures are almost impossible to happen in the first couple of years of life, because the nose is primarily just soft cartilage. But because of the abundant blood supply, there can be a lot of swelling and a lot of black and blueness. So you will probably encounter that as he becomes more mobile and his nose impacts something in your world, but not to worry. Nosebleeds also can happen in children this age because there's a rich blood supply here and here called Kieselbach's plexus, and that area is very accessible to little fingers. So as his fingers become more probing in all of his little orifices, he may accidentally, kickstart a little bleed there. And so one of the things to know is that nosebleeds are very common in this age group, even this young, because he is getting more adept with his fingers. But they can be easily stopped by just a little gentle pressure on the nostril, and that's all you really need for a minute or two. Now, speaking of nostrils and speaking of breathing, babies when they're younger breathe in a fashion called periodic breathing. It's very irregular, big pause, and it's more of a reflex type of breathing. But now he's probably into more of a rhythmic breathing cycle. So when you watch him sleep or when you listen to him sleep, he has more of a rhythm like we do, an up and down regular rhythm that's probably broken up every once in a while by a cough or by a sigh. So babies get more on a metronome with their breathing now and are much more rhythmic, and they generally will breathe less rapidly than they do when they're babies.
It made me nervous when he was a newborn.
Exactly. It makes every parent nervous. So now this part of his being has matured enough that you can settle down a little bit as you're listening to him sleep. The other thing that babies do at this age, which is wonderful, is that they can actually adapt to a stuffy nose much better. They can breathe through their mouths if need be, if they have a cold, and whereas they can't do that when they're little young infants. So if he does have a stuffy nose and he doesn't need to eat, he can usually use his mouth to breathe until it's feeding time, and then we still do need to clear babies' noses for that. Now his mouth is pretty active right now, and it's pretty active on mom's breast and also on his little morning snack here. And baby sucking reflex is still there and still very, very strong for the first year. And then it becomes less of a driving force in their life unless they're hooked on pacifiers. And then that sucking is a self-soothing mechanism after that point. So you may still, in a child who's his age,
he'd still like to eat more on me.
And feel free. Sucking blisters at the top of the lip are still a very common thing. So that little sheer force of forceful sucking on a breast or even on a bottle can still exist. So you may see that little piece of skin peeling off repeatedly on the upper lip, and we know it's normal.
But there's a good verb.
And there we see that your two fingers have made their way into your mouth, because certainly by 3 to 4 months of age, a normally developing baby will find their hands. And this is an aha moment for a baby, because they can put their fingers in their mouth, they can suck on them on their own, and they start their own self-soothing mechanism right now. Now, no baby has ever swallowed their fingers. Some babies with extraordinarily long fingers, occasionally if they get them back too far, may gag themselves, but that's never a danger. It's never a problem. But it is a wonderful thing for him, because he can hang out and chill a little bit. He can amuse himself with his fingers, and now he's amusing himself with his toes as well.